Hi everyone, today we're going to be working on graphing sine and cosine, and the new thing we're going to be doing today is graphing sine and cosine with a period change. Now it's important to remember when I'm talking about the period of a sine or cosine graph, so if I just have a graph sketched out here, this is an example of one period. You can think of a period as how long it takes for the graph to get back to its starting point, right? Because here it was at 0 and now it's getting back. It's going to start repeating. So remember, the general equation is y equals a sine of b times x minus c plus d. Now when we're talking about the period change, we're going to be using b. In order to find the period, we do 2 pi over b. So the period is something you're going to have to calculate every time. It's not just b. You calculate it using this. Alright, so now that we know what the period is and how to find it, let's go ahead and create some graphs. So I always like to start by identifying the important information. So let's take a look at this. So the first thing it asks for is amplitude. Amplitude is always the number in front of the sine or cosine. In this case there's nothing there, so it's just 1. If we're looking at the vertical shift, that's if there's a number being added or subtracted on. We don't have that, so it would be 0. Now to find the period, this is where we use that little short formula. So it's always 2 pi over b. In this case, b is 2. So it's 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. So now we want to find the intervals. This is where we're going to plot our points for the graph. You always divide the period by 4. So we would have pi over 4. So for the interval, you always divide the period by 4. So now we can go ahead and start graphing this. So we know that the amplitude is 1, so I'm going to draw in my tick marks here. And then we know our interval is pi over 4, so that means I'm going to have pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which would just be pi over 2. Then we've got 3 pi over 4, and then we have pi. This last number should always match what you got for your period. Alright, since it's a sine curve, we know it's going to start at 0, 0. Then since it's positive, we go up to 1, down to 0, down to negative 1, and back up to 0. So that gives us our sine curve. And we can draw little arrows at the end to show that it keeps going. Alright, so let's move on to the next example. So we've got the cosine of pi x. So the amplitude again is going to be 1, and the vertical shift is 0. Now for the period, we're going to do 2 pi over b. In this case, b is pi. So 2 pi divided by pi is just 2. So to get our interval, we do 2 divided by 4, which is 1/2. So we can start creating our graph. We know the amplitude is 1, so we've got 1 and negative 1. Then our interval was 1/2, so we need 4 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one will be 1/2. The second will be 2 over 2, so that's just 1. Then we get 3 over 2, and then 4 over 2, which is 2. So now we can draw in our graph. This is a cosine graph that's positive, so it's going to start up at 1. Here we go. Down to 0, down to negative 1, up to 0, and back up to 1. Alright, and there we have our graph. And again, you can see the first number is always going to be whatever the interval is. The last number is always whatever the period is. It's really important to remember how to count using fractions, because, for example, here we had 1/2. If you have trouble, you can always use your calculator, right? Like to get the second one, you're just doing 1/2 plus 1/2, which is 1. And then 1 plus 1/2, which is 3/2. And then 3/2 plus 1/2, which is 2. So you could always use your calculator to help you out if you're a little stuck. Alright, let's go on to number 3. So if we look here, we have a number in front of the sine, so that means our amplitude is 3. We still don't have a number being added or subtracted, so our vertical shift is 0. For the period, we do 2 pi over b. In this case, b is 4. So 2 pi divided by 4 would be pi over 2. So in our interval, I'm going to write it down here where there's a little more space. We've got pi over 2 divided by 4. Remember, if we've got a fraction divided by something, we can just multiply it by the reciprocal. So pi over 2 times 1/4, which is going to give us pi over 8. So that's our interval. So to start our graph, we have an amplitude of 3. So 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, -3. Then we need 4 tick marks. The first one is going to be pi over 8. Then if we've got 1 pi over 8 plus 1 pi over 8, that'd be 2 pi over 8, which would reduce to pi over 4. Again, remember, you can use your calculator to help you with the fractions if you're a little stuck. Right, then we've got, this was 2 pi over 8. We need to add another one, so that would be 3 pi over 8. And if we add another pi over 8 to that, that would be 4 pi over 8, which would reduce to pi over 2. So that's good because that was our period, and we know that the last tick mark should always have the same value as our period. So now we can go ahead and start our graph. It's a sine curve, so it's going to start at 0, 0. And then since it has an amplitude of 3, we're going to go all the way up to 3 here, back down to 0, -3, then we're going to end at pi over 2. And remember to add some arrows so you show that your graph keeps on going. Alright, so let's take a look at number 4. So for number 4, we have a number in front of our sine, so that tells us that the amplitude is 3. There's still no number being added or subtracted, so a vertical shift of 0. To find the period, we do 2 pi over b. b here is 1/2. So remember, we've got a fraction involved, so let's do 2 pi over 1/2. That would be the same thing as 2 pi times 2 over 1. So that's going to give us 4 pi. And now for our interval, I'm going to do 4 pi divided by 4, which will just be pi. So we can get our graph set up here at an amplitude of 3. Then I need my 4 tick marks here. With the interval is pi, so we're going to start at pi. And then we've got pi plus pi would be 2 pi. 2 pi plus pi is 3 pi. And 3 pi plus pi is 4 pi, which matches our period, so that's good. We know we did it right. So now we have a sine curve. So we're going to start at 0, 0. We're going to go up to 3, down to 0, down to -3, and back up to 0. Alright, so let's take a look at number 5. For number 5, I'm going to just get you set up with all the information, and then I want you to graph on your own, and we'll go over it in class tomorrow. So if we take a look at this, for the amplitude, we have a 2 in front of the cosine. This one we do have a vertical shift because we've got a number being added on here, so that's going to be 1. For period, we do 2 pi over b. Our b is 2 pi. So 2 pi divided by 2 pi is 1. And then to get our interval, we do 1 divided by 4, which is just 1/4. Alright, so I'm going to leave you to create your graph. Make sure you have that done before class tomorrow, and we will go over it. Good luck!